opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of Shaw Cable Systems or of the station. Through our access policy, we provide the opportunity for community groups and individuals to express their points of view.
Everything you wish you could ask, straight up, to the point, no escape. You never get the answer if you don't ask the question.
Welcome to Winnipeg Direct on Shaw, a show that targets big issues, current events, and hot topics that affect our cities, provinces, and country. I'm Megan Duffy, and joining our panel is Jim Tree-Living, chairman and owner of Boston Pizza International, Inc., and panelist investor on CBC's Dragon's Den, Doug Buehler, president of Buehler Furniture, and Brian Kelsey from State of the City Research. Thank you, everyone, for being here. For the next half hour, our topic will be Canadian versus American business. How has the relationship evolved in light of the ambiguous American economy and a rising Canadian dollar? So, Brian, I'm going to throw the first question at you. How has the relationship been affected from the Canadian dollar rising?
Well, it's been affected from our end in terms of the advantage is that some of our firms, not enough, but some of our firms are investing more in new machinery, new software, new physical plant to become more competitive. That's what everybody always hoped would happen if our dollar grew, and that's what's happening. I think it's important on the American side to realize that even though we're a major trading partner, the Americans don't see a rising loonie. The Americans see a dropping dollar. And so from that standpoint, certainly the Americans may be more concerned about their own vulnerabilities in terms of the trade deficit and so forth. They're more concerned that the products that are most important to them, that we do sell to them, oil being the number 1, number 2, and number 3 commodity on that list, that's becoming more and more expensive. So I think a rising dollar from a small standpoint in terms of the worldview of American issues creates some tensions that we need to anticipate more and work with more carefully if we're going to preserve our place in the American market.
Jim, how do you think it's affected the economy?
I think it's, I live part-time in the U.S. and I part-time in Canada, and I think it's affected some of the manufacturing in Canada. Their prices have gone up, and we were talking about this, and especially the Ontario market, maybe more than anywhere else, because of the trade deficit between the U.S. and Canada with regard to cars and all the products that that we produce in the country. But I think it's been good for the economy of Canada. I think that it is a stronger dollar. When I moved to the U.S. 10 years ago, back and forth, our dollar was 68 cents, and it was too cheap in my mind. That I think we have to get more for what we were supplying around the world, and we are a supply nation, and
right.
that's what we look at. I think for the Americans, I mean, living down there, I still don't think they realize that we do ship them oil sometimes. They think that everything comes from Saudi Arabia or somewhere. I don't know, but when you think we're the biggest supplier they do have in oil now, and it is more expensive for them. But when you look at world prices, and we were talking about this the other day, when I was in Europe, they're paying $8 for a gallon of gas. When you look at our side, and have been for some time. Americans, we in certain areas are maybe up to $3 and $4, but we're still cheaper than we are in some places in Canada for our same oil.
Mr. Buehler, how has your business been affected by the rising dollar? Yeah,
so to put it into context, from where we've come, the 68-cent dollar, I've participated in that economy, and today it's over $1.04. So you have to reinvent yourself because the currency advantage is gone, and that's been gone for 3 or 4 years already. And the Americans don't, if you talk to them about currency, they just glaze over because they don't care. They don't have to care. They used to be 40% of the world GDP. Today they're only 21 or 22. And when we send them an invoice in Canadian dollars, I don't even think they may not even know that there is a Canadian dollar. That's how inclusive they are in some ways. But so we had to reinvent ourselves and have a different value story, and the price story based on currency is gone. And if you're a Canadian manufacturer, which we are, it has been a brutal trench warfare just figuring out how to, if you want to sell to the U.S. economy. So that's, and is it going to, will it stay there? I don't see it. I don't see it at $1.15, but I don't see it going back to 80 cents either. So somewhere in between there is maybe the range. And But the silver lining and all that is most of our equipment is purchased in US dollars. So now I'm buying equipment and I can tool up at a dollar advantage. So that there's a little bit of a nice break for the manufacturer.
I think that's the silver lining if you look at that same Doug story and project it to 3 dozen other Canadian manufacturers or hundreds, where to Jim's point, the reason this is good news is because however painful the transition has been, we couldn't as a country rely permanently on a currency advantage that was out of our control. So this transition, however ugly, it's cost Manitoba billions of dollars in terms of manufacturing sales over the last few years, for example. We're down at 2005 levels in terms of 2005, 2006 levels in terms of gross manufacturing exports right now. Nevertheless, all of a number of Canadian businesses have done well in retooling and adjusting so that they're now much better equipped to actually compete in the global market rather than competing in a currency advantage market, which was certainly the old business model of the previous economy, as Doug referred to.
I think the other thing too, we've picked up other customers. We're not just the U.S. anymore. If we had an old saying in Canada here years ago that if they caught the cold, we got the flu. And I think that's changed now. It's the other way around. And I think the Chinas of the world are coming in. The Asian market is really big for some of our manufacturers. And I think that what you'll see in Manitoba, especially here, that you're going to see other markets that they can produce for. And so I think that the global economy is going to help us with our strong dollar as well. I mean, we're going to get paid for what we're getting. And to me, that's the same thing. And yet we could be retooling, like you were saying earlier, with U.S. Equipment and stuff like that, or it's manufactured down there. We can buy it cheaper, and there's a bit of a saving there. But I think overall, I think I'd like to see it right around. If it's going to be high, it should be $1.02, and if it's going to be low, maybe at 95 cents or 97 cents. But right around the dollar is fine. I don't think it's going to affect us that much.
The economists say the U.S. is 20% more productive than the Canadian labor hour. So I don't know if that's changing a little bit, but so that's where some of the car companies, which of course is a big part of the trade across the border, say an 85-cent dollar is good for the car industry. So it's but it's a challenge.
It is a challenge.
Brian, what would you say are some of Canada's competitive advantages that we have over the U.S.?
Well, the biggest competitive advantage is that we've been able to ride out the global recession because of our vast pool of resources and high-priced commodities. The downside of that is if the price slips on those commodities, then we're in huge trouble. And I think Canadians need to be wary of that as we're going forward. There are some advantages we've got in terms of we're good at stability. We're good at stable businesses. My favorite Canadian business, Couche-Tard, is a penny pincher in terms of running gas station concession stands, and yet they make a healthy profit by managing thousands of little operations. We're fantastic at that sort of thing. We're not as great at the visionary stuff, and I'm sure that subject will come up. But we've got good management teams. We've got a culture that's trusted around the world in terms of low corruption, political stability, low political risk, and so forth. So that gives us a good foundation. The real problem we've had for the last 10, 20 years, or even my entire lifetime, is that we haven't been really good at using that foundation to project out and build trading relationships beyond what we've got with the U.S. So this complacency is a constant problem, whether it's in productivity or marketing, and I'm sure we'll talk about how to attack that in a second, but we've got a foundation to build from if we want to do that.
So Jim, how do we attack that? I feel like there's this, Americans think big, they dream big, whereas in Canada, do you think that's the case?
I think we're starting to see that from the Dragon's Den thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just from the entrepreneurs, the young kids that are coming onto the show, the young entrepreneurs that we're seeing, not only just kids, but we're starting to see people come on the show with not just an idea anymore. They got a business. They realize from our show that you can't come on there and just somebody's going to throw money at you. It's going to be a situation where what's your cash flow? How do you know? You have to do a business plan. You have to do all these things. And I think Canadians are we don't give ourselves credit sometimes. And I get a sort of a projection because I'm sitting on the other side looking out into this thing, and it, my God, we've changed. And we've changed in the last few years. I mean, we're starting to see more Canadians look across the other borders. It's not just the U.S. border anymore. And there, you know, we go down and we buy a house in Florida, or we buy a house in Palm Springs or wherever, and we're going down there with cash and we're paying. We're not getting into debt. We may get a little more debt in Canada because we've taken the cash to go down there, but we're buying stuff at a reasonable price. Again, China. I was in China in January and Korea and these places, and they talk about how Canadians are coming over there now and looking at the businesses. When I went there in '80, we got into China. There was myself and 3 other people looking at the whole country.
But is it a good thing that we are sending so much work over to Asia?
I think.
It's cheaper.
We don't have the labor here. This is the big thing in Canada. You look at our restaurant business. We've imported something like 3,000 workers in Alberta alone, and they haven't even got going yet. But we had to import 3,000 people, go through the government agencies to do all this and get them in the country. Actually, when the tsunami happened, that's when we got some of those people in the country, because our labor force is not what we need for as a big manufacturer. We're a supplier of stuff around the country, around the world, and I think that we've got some great things to do. We've got some great embassies. I met an ambassador in China. I mean, they're touting Canada, and they're really a lot better than they were 20 years ago. They've got some sharp people in those embassies to help you get help. If you're going out and anybody out there that is going into business should go to see those embassies. And they got tons of people they want to do business with.
So Doug, what do you think is the competitive advantage that America has over Canada?
The U.S. over Canada?
Yeah.
Well, you've got, you know, we've got one major highway that goes across our country. You go 100 miles south and there's hundreds of interstates and communicate, you know, the roads, the infrastructure, the schools. So they are and they trade amongst themselves, or between themselves. When Mad Cow hit Canada, it affected 30% of our beef exports. It affected 3% of the U.S. exports, at least the beef that was going to Asia. So because they can trade within their states, they're 10 times our size. So there's lots of advantages, but.
Brian, what do you think are some of the major advantages?
Well, I think the biggest advantage to pound on, and this won't come as a surprise to anybody who's met me before, is the difference in business culture, and specifically how American businesses view their relationship with government and vice versa, versus how Canadian businesses view their relationship with government and vice versa. Although this situation is worsening in the States, for the record, and I think we're getting better in some fronts in Canada, Doug speaks to the point that the Americans have tended to focus government's role in terms of dealing with business, with building an infrastructure and a framework within which to do business. Here in Canada, too many of our businesses, especially before Dragon's Den, used to think of the government as the financier of first resort, the lender of first resort, the customer of first resort, the trainer of first resort, and even the marketer of first resort. That it's the only reason I have any right to sit on a panel with 2 successful businessmen like this at all is because I've served in government on the other side when entrepreneurs have come to me instead of coming to people like Jim, looking for cash, looking for support from government, and you throw up your hands and say, well, have you tried private financing? Have you actually gone out into the market? Happily, that culture is gradually changing in Canada, but where the Americans have beaten us so often is because they treat business as business, that the first solution to a business problem for most American businesses, not all, but most, is still a problem that they hatch and develop and finance themselves.
I sadly have to cut you off, but don't worry, we'll be back with more business talk right after the break.